Marcus Bennett was 32 years old, had an 18-month-old son, and no babysitter that crucial evening. The gala dinner at the Four Seasons in Manhattan was supposed to be his breakthrough moment. Pitch his tech startup prototype to major investors, impress the CEOs, finally escape the daily struggle of being a single father trying to build a future. But at 7 p.m., when he should have been ready in his suit and tie, he found himself holding little Noah, changing a diaper, with a text from the babysitter saying, "So sorry, sudden flu." He had two choices: give up the opportunity of a lifetime, or show up at a high-level dinner with a toddler in his arms. When he walked into the ballroom lit by crystal chandeliers, with Noah sucking his pacifier and staring with enormous eyes, he felt every gaze turn toward him. Whispers, disapproving smiles, someone shaking their head. Then, from across the room, an elegant woman in a rose-colored dress approached. She was Sarah Mitchell, CEO of one of the largest venture capital firms in America. Marcus started apologizing, but she did something completely unexpected. She took Noah from his arms, smiled at the child, and said 5 words that would change everything. Finally, someone real in here. Chun! Marcus Bennett had learned to survive on 3 hours of sleep, cold coffee, and the constant awareness that everything could go wrong at any moment. That was life as a single father, with a small child, and a tech startup consuming every free minute of his existence. 18 months earlier, his wife Sarah had died during childbirth. Sudden complications, massive hemorrhage, doctors running, then silence. Marcus found himself holding a newborn, and an emptiness inside that seemed bottomless. The first months were hell: diapers, bottles, night crying, and loneliness so deep he sometimes woke up in the middle of the night, wondering if he'd make it. But Noah became his reason to keep going. Those brown eyes looking at him with absolute trust. That toothless smile when Marcus came home. Those little hands clutching his neck. For Noah, Marcus would move mountains. The tech startup was born from necessity. Working a traditional 9-to-5 office job was impossible with a small child. So Marcus developed an AI app for business logistics management, working from 4 in the morning until 7, when Noah woke up, and then from 8 p.m. to midnight, when the baby finally slept. The app attracted attention. Small clients at first, then larger companies. Word of mouth worked, and now, after a year of grueling work, he finally had the opportunity to present his project to major investors at the annual Tech Innovation America Gala dinner. The invitation arrived 3 weeks earlier, an exclusive event at the Four Seasons Manhattan, the historic 5-star hotel in Midtown. CEOs, venture capitalists, successful entrepreneurs. Dress code, formal elegant. Ticket cost, $3,000 that Marcus paid from his savings, considering it an investment in Noah's future. He organized everything meticulously. The babysitter, Jennifer, a reliable college student who watched Noah twice a week. The new suit bought on sale, but good quality. The 5-minute presentation he'd practiced 100 times in front of the mirror. But at 7 that November evening, while giving Noah a bath and mentally preparing for the night, the phone rang. Jennifer, with a nasal, weak voice, apologized profusely. Sudden flu, high fever, impossible to move from bed. Marcus desperately called all alternatives. His mother lived in Boston. Too far. Other parents from daycare didn't answer or were busy. The elderly neighbors didn't feel up to managing such a small child. At 7:30, sitting on the couch of his small Brooklyn apartment with Noah playing with colored blocks at his feet, Marcus had to face reality. He could leave Noah. Where? With whom? Impossible. Or he could give up, throw away $3,000 and the opportunity of a lifetime. It was looking at Noah that he made the decision. The child looked at him with those enormous eyes, smiled, and said, "Dada," in that little voice that melted his heart. Marcus understood. He wouldn't leave his son. Never, for any reason. But he wouldn't give up the opportunity either. At 7:50, Marcus was in a taxi headed to the Four Seasons with Noah in his car seat, the child perfect in his little blue outfit. Marcus in his best jacket, with a bag full of diapers, wipes, bottles, and quiet toys. The plan was simple and desperate. Arrive, find a discreet corner, keep Noah happy with toys, give his presentation if called, then escape before the situation became embarrassing. 3 hours maximum. But when the taxi stopped in front of the hotel's majestic entrance, with marble columns illuminated and elegant guests entering in evening wear costing more than his monthly rent, Marcus felt panic grip his stomach. The Four Seasons Manhattan ballroom took your breath away. Crystal chandeliers hung from the frescoed ceiling, projecting rainbows of light onto walls covered in golden silk. Round tables perfectly arranged, each with white orchid centerpieces and flickering candles. A string quartet played Mozart in the corner. The guests were exactly what Marcus expected. Men in perfectly tailored tuxedos, women in designer evening gowns, sophisticated conversations accompanied by glasses of Cristal champagne. No one had children in tow. No one even looked like they remembered what it was to have mundane daily responsibilities, like changing diapers. Marcus stopped at the threshold, Noah in his arms. The child had wide eyes, fascinated by the sparkling lights. For a moment, no one noticed them. Then, like a wave propagating, heads began to turn. First, just curious glances. Then, discreet whispers behind hands. Then barely masked, disapproving smiles. Marcus saw an elderly woman in a black velvet dress shaking her head with disgusted air. A man in a tuxedo said something to his neighbor, and both laughed. Marcus felt the heat of embarrassment rising to his face. He'd made a terrible mistake. He should have stayed home. This was ridiculous, inappropriate, a disaster waiting to happen. He was about to turn and leave when a reception attendant approached, a young man in impeccable uniform, with a professional but slightly perplexed expression. Marcus immediately apologized, explaining the babysitter situation, promising they'd be discreet. The words came out in a nervous stream, while Noah, blissful in his innocence, smiled at the attendant and reached his little hands toward the shiny tie. The attendant hesitated, clearly unprepared for this situation. He said he'd consult the event coordinator. Marcus waited standing in the lobby for 5 minutes that felt like hours, swaying slightly to keep Noah calm, feeling the stares of passing guests. Some seemed amused, others scandalized. An elderly woman actually stopped to tell him this wasn't appropriate for a professional event before walking away with a snobbish air. He was seriously considering leaving when he saw a figure crossing the room in his direction. A woman in her 40s, elegant in a pearl gray suit, brown hair pulled into a perfect chignon. She walked with the authority of someone used to commanding. She introduced herself as the event coordinator. Her tone was professional but cold, as she explained the dinner was an adults-only event, that children's presence wasn't anticipated, that it created logistical complications and potential disturbances. Marcus apologized again, explained the situation once more, said he understood, that he'd leave, that he was sorry for wasting the ticket. His voice betrayed the disappointment he tried to hide. It was at that moment something unexpected happened. A female voice, clear and decisive, interrupted the conversation. From across the room, a woman was approaching. She wore a simple but elegant rose-colored dress, blonde hair pulled into an elegant low chignon, pearl earrings. But it wasn't her appearance that captured attention. It was the way she moved, with a quiet confidence that made heads turn. The coordinator immediately stiffened, straightening her back in an involuntary gesture of respect. The woman stopped in front of Marcus and Noah, completely ignoring the coordinator. She looked at the child with a genuine smile that lit up her green eyes. Then, without saying a word, she extended her arms toward Noah. The gesture was so natural, so without hesitation, that Marcus found himself handing over his son before even thinking about it. Noah, surprisingly, didn't cry. He looked at the stranger with curiosity, then smiled and grabbed a strand of her blonde hair that had escaped the chignon. The woman laughed, a sincere, warm laugh. Then she looked at Marcus, with those green eyes full of understanding. She turned to the coordinator, who seemed to have transformed into a pillar of salt. With a tone that admitted no discussion, she explained Marcus was her personal guest, that the child was more than welcome. The coordinator stammered something incomprehensible and quickly walked away. Only then did the woman turn to Marcus and introduce herself. She was Sarah Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Capital, one of the largest venture capital firms in America. The name preceded her. Marcus had read about her in Forbes, studied her investments, knew she managed a $500 million fund, and now she had his son in her arms and was making him laugh by making funny faces. Sarah Mitchell was 42, had an estimated net worth of $80 million, and a reputation as one of America's shrewdest investors. But at that moment, with Noah laughing and pulling her hair, she simply seemed like a woman who knew how to make a child smile. She led Marcus to her table, the central one reserved for VIPs, under the incredulous gaze of all other guests. She sat, put Noah on her lap, and asked Marcus to tell his story. Marcus hesitated, overwhelmed, but there was something in her eyes, a rare genuineness, that put him at ease. He told about his wife's death, the sleepless nights, the constant struggle, and he told about his app, the dream of building a future for Noah. Sarah listened silently, absently cradling the child. Then she shared her story. She, too, had been a single mother, had left an abusive husband when her son Luke was 2. She, too, had worked until dawn while the baby slept, building her company from scratch. She, too, had brought her son to meetings when she had no alternatives. While they talked, other guests approached. Noah, with his innocence, had the effect of melting even the most rigid people. A 70-year-old CEO played peekaboo with him. The man who had laughed earlier approached to apologize. The dinner proceeded surreally. Marcus at the main table, Noah passing from arm to arm among guests, suddenly turned doting aunts and uncles. When presentation time came, Sarah insisted. She took Noah in her arms while Marcus went on stage. Instead of being nervous and formal, Marcus was authentic. He talked about his app, but also why he'd created it, about wanting to build a future for his son, to show that even when life knocks you down, you can get back up, about how being a father had made him a better entrepreneur. The applause was warm. 3 investors left him business cards, but the crucial moment came at the end. Sarah took him aside, with Noah asleep in her arms. Mitchell Capital would invest $2 million in his startup. She would be personally involved as a mentor. Marcus was speechless. It was 10 times more than he'd hoped for. In the following days, Marcus found himself catapulted into a world.
Enjoying the story? Give it a little like, and don't forget to subscribe. Now then, let's carry on.
He'd only seen from afar. Mitchell Capital's office occupied 3 floors of a modern building in Midtown Manhattan, with panoramic views of the New York skyline. Glass-walled conference rooms, designer desks, an army of analysts examining million-dollar investments. Sarah invited him to discuss the deal details but insisted he bring Noah. The office, she explained, needed to get used to the idea that work and life aren't separate compartments, but integrated parts of a complete person's existence. Marcus arrived nervous, with Noah in the baby carrier and a bag full of quiet toys. But he discovered Sarah had prepared a surprise. A small play area had been set up in a corner of her main conference room. Soft carpet, colored blocks, children's books. During the meeting, while discussing valuations, milestones, and growth plans, Noah played quietly nearby. Occasionally, he'd approach Marcus for a hug, or Sarah to proudly show her a colored block he'd stacked. The lawyers and financial consultants at the meeting seemed initially perplexed, but Sarah handled the situation so naturally that soon everyone accepted the child's presence as normal. During one discussion, Sarah shared something personal. She told how, 20 years earlier, when building her company, she'd been forced to bring Luke to a crucial meeting because the babysitter got sick. The investors, all men, had looked at her with disgust. One told her that if she couldn't even manage her personal life, how could she think she could manage a company? That comment, instead of crushing her, made her furious. She left that meeting determined to prove being a mother wasn't a weakness, but a strength. That the ability to manage parenting's complexities made someone more capable, not less, of managing business complexities. She'd built Mitchell Capital into one of America's most respected venture capital firms, doing so without ever hiding being a mother, never apologizing for bringing her humanity to work. Now, seeing Marcus, she recognized that same determination. She wanted to ensure he didn't have to fight the same battles she had. The final agreement was generous beyond expectations. $2 million for 30% of the company, but with clauses protecting Marcus's operational control, full support from Mitchell Capital's team, and, most importantly, complete flexibility to manage his commitments as a father. But there was also something unexpected. Sarah proposed structuring the deal so part of the equity would be put in a trust for Noah, ensuring the child would directly benefit from the company's future success. Sarah explained that for too long the business world had operated by rules written by men who had wives at home managing everything else, that these rules unfairly punished single parents, working mothers, anyone trying to balance work and family. She wanted to change those rules. She wanted to invest in people like Marcus, not despite being parents, but precisely because they were. Because she knew a parent fighting to give their children a better future works with motivation no financial incentive can replicate. In following months, Marcus worked harder than ever, but for the first time with adequate resources and real support. He hired a small development team, opened a real office, acquired increasingly larger clients. But he always kept his priorities clear. Noah came first. Meetings were scheduled around daycare hours. If the child got sick, Marcus worked from home. His carefully chosen team shared these values. Many were parents themselves and appreciated the flexibility Marcus offered. Sarah became more than just an investor. She became a mentor, advisor, and gradually, a friend. She and Luke, her now grown son, became regular presences in Marcus and Noah's lives. 1 year after that evening at the Four Seasons, Marcus's app had 50,000 business users and $3 million in revenue. It had been reviewed in TechCrunch, won innovation awards, attracted international investor interest. But real success for Marcus was measured in different moments. Like when Noah, now 2.5, said, "Dada work," with pride. Like when he managed to attend all daycare recitals, sitting in back with laptop on his knees, but present, always present. There were challenges, obviously. Nights staying awake until dawn to fix critical bugs after putting Noah to bed. Crucial meetings interrupted because daycare called about a feverish child. The constant feeling of being pulled in opposite directions. But he had an advantage. He truly understood his customers. His app was designed to make work more efficient because he desperately needed efficiency. Every function, every detail came from his direct experience of trying to do more with less time. And he had Sarah, who understood these challenges in a way few others could. When Marcus had a panic attack before an important presentation to German investors, Sarah called him at 2 a.m., talked for an hour, sharing her own past fears and insecurities. When Noah had to be hospitalized for bad bronchitis, and Marcus thought about canceling a crucial networking event, Sarah arrived at the hospital, sat by the child's bed, and sent Marcus to the event while she stayed with Noah. It wasn't just business for her. It was personal. She saw in Marcus and Noah an echo of her own story, and felt invested in their success in a way that went beyond numbers and profits. But not everything was easy. There were still moments of judgment, misunderstanding. An important potential client canceled a partnership, when Marcus had to postpone a meeting because Noah had chicken pox. An American investor commented Marcus didn't seem to take business seriously enough when he saw him leave a conference call to feed the baby. Each time, Marcus had to fight the impulse to apologize, to feel inadequate. Sarah helped him understand he didn't need to justify being a present father, that anyone who didn't understand the best leaders are complete people with complete lives didn't deserve to work with him. Slowly, Marcus began building not just a successful company, but a corporate culture reflecting his values. He hired other single parents, offered real flexibility to all employees, created an office nursery for emergencies, and he discovered something surprising. This wasn't a weakness, but an enormous strength. Employees were more loyal, motivated, productive. Turnover was almost zero. The company became recognized not just for the excellent product, but for the human and innovative culture. 2 years after that fateful evening, Marcus received an invitation that made him smile with irony. The same Tech Innovation America Gala dinner at the same Four Seasons, but this time not as an unknown hoping to get noticed, as keynote speaker invited to tell his success story. Sarah called when he got the invitation. She laughed, remembering that night when he'd entered, terrified with Noah in his arms. Marcus accepted the invitation, but with one condition: he'd bring Noah, not hidden, not apologizing, together with him on stage, as a living symbol of what he'd learned. The evening of the event, the ballroom was identical to how he remembered it. Same crystal chandeliers, same string quartet, same opulence. But Marcus was different. No longer nervous, no longer insecure. He wore an elegant but unpretentious suit, and had Noah, now 4, dressed in a miniature suit. When he went on stage, with Noah holding his hand and curiously watching the crowd, the silence was total. Then applause began, warm and genuine, led by Sarah sitting front row with a proud smile. Marcus told his story, not the cleaned-up professional version, but the real one. He told of that evening's desperation 2 years earlier, the fear of being judged, the embarrassment of entering with a child in his arms. He told of Sarah, who instead of judging, had seen his humanity as strength. He told how that choice to bring Noah, born from desperation, became the most important decision of his career, because it forced him to be authentic. It forced him to admit he couldn't do everything alone, that he needed help, that his priorities included not just professional success, but being a good father. And paradoxically, that vulnerability made him stronger. It attracted investors like Sarah, who valued authenticity. It created a corporate culture attracting motivated talent. It built a better product because he truly understood the problems he was solving. He looked at Noah, patiently standing beside him on stage, occasionally waving at the audience. Marcus explained his son had made his success possible, not despite being an obstacle, but precisely because he'd forced him to be better in every aspect. And he shared advice. Don't hide your humanity. Don't apologize for having a complete life. Don't believe those who say you must choose between professional and personal success. Because the most extraordinary people, and he looked at Sarah as he said it, were those who'd integrated all aspects of their lives, who brought their complete humanity to everything they did. The final applause was thunderous, but for Marcus, the best moment came after, when Sarah approached them. She took Noah in her arms, just as she had that first evening. Then she shared news. Thanks to Marcus, Mitchell Capital had completely changed its investment policies. Now they actively sought entrepreneur parents, recognizing that the ability to manage family complexity often translated to superior abilities managing business complexity. And she'd started a special fund dedicated to supporting single-parent entrepreneurs, providing not just capital, but also childcare support, mentorship, and a network of other parents. The fund was called Noah Fund, in honor of the child who'd unknowingly catalyzed all this change. Marcus felt tears rise to his eyes, not for the honor, but for what it represented. Everything he'd gone through, the sleepless nights, loneliness, constant struggle had led not just to his success, but to creating opportunities for others facing the same challenges. Noah, unaware of the moment's depth, smiled at Sarah and asked if they could get ice cream. Everyone laughed, and the emotional tension broke in a moment of pure joy. That evening, after the event, Marcus took Noah to Central Park. It was a warm May evening, city lights sparkling, people strolling, enjoying the fresh air. He sat on a bench with Noah on his lap. The child was tired but happy, resting his head on his father's shoulder. Marcus thought of his wife, how much he missed her, how much he wished she were there to see all this. But he also thought how, in a strange, unexpected way, the tragedy of her death had led Marcus to discover strength he didn't know he had, to build a life that valued what truly mattered. Noah fell asleep in his arms while the city lights shone around them, and Marcus, for the first time in years, felt deep peace. Not because everything was perfect, it wasn't, and never would be, but because he knew, with absolute certainty, he was living the right life, for himself, and especially for his son. That evening at the Four Seasons, when he'd entered terrified with a child in his arms, he thought he had to apologize for his humanity. Instead, he'd discovered his humanity was his greatest gift. And it all started with 5 simple words. Finally, someone real in here. Like if you believe being a parent makes people stronger, not weaker. Comment if you've ever had to bring your personal life to work and discovered it was a strength. Share this story of vulnerability becoming strength, of humanity triumphing. Subscribe for more stories proving true success includes all of who you are, not just one part. Sometimes the thing you think is your greatest weakness is actually your greatest strength. And sometimes it only takes one person who sees your humanity as a gift, not a flaw, to change everything. Marcus learned you don't have to choose between being a good parent and being a successful entrepreneur. You can be both. You must be both. Because true success is living an integrated life, where every part of you is valued and celebrated.